Today, we're going on a journey, not just through history, but through the birth of a nation. This is the story of how 13 British colonies transformed into the United States of America, a country that would go on to change the world. But this transformation wasn't easy. It was filled with conflict, rebellion, courage, and revolutionary ideas. Let us rewind the clock back to the early 1600s, to a time when America wasn't yet a country, but a distant land full of hope and opportunity. The colonial beginnings, 1607–1750. In 1607, the first permanent English settlement was established in Jamestown, Virginia. Over the next century, more British colonies were formed along the East Coast. By the mid-1700s, there were 13 colonies, including places like Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Each colony had its own government, but all were under the control of the British Crown. Colonists came from all walks of life: farmers, traders, craftsmen, many looking for religious freedom or a better future. Life was tough, but the land was rich with resources. As trade grew and cities expanded, the colonies began to feel more connected, not just to Britain, but to each other. The seeds of tension, 1754 to 1770. In 1754, the French and Indian War began, a conflict between Britain and France fought largely in North America. Though Britain won, the war left it heavily in debt. To recover financially, Britain began taxing the colonies. Acts like the Stamp Act, 1765, and Townshend Acts, 1767, forced colonists to pay taxes on everyday items like paper, tea, and glass, without giving them a voice in Parliament. This sparked the famous phrase, "No taxation without representation." Colonists believed it was unfair to be taxed by a government in which they had no say. Tensions escalated, protests broke out, and groups like the Sons of Liberty began organizing resistance. The Boston Tea Party, 1773. One of the most iconic acts of defiance happened in December 1773. In response to the Tea Act, which gave the British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales, American colonists disguised as Native Americans boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party, and it shocked the British government. In retaliation, they passed the Intolerable Acts, a series of laws that punished Massachusetts and took away many colonial rights. By now, the idea of full independence was gaining ground. The Road to Revolution, 1774 to 1776. In 1774, delegates from the colonies met in Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress. They didn't call for independence yet, but they agreed to stand together and resist British policies. By 1775, fighting had already begun. The battles of Lexington and Concord marked the first military engagements of the American Revolutionary War. Colonial militias fought back, and the revolution had begun. A year later, on July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson. It boldly stated that all men are created equal, and that governments exist only with the consent of the governed. The colonies officially declared they were no longer part of the British Empire. The War for Independence, 1775–1783. The Revolutionary War was long and brutal. The British Army was one of the strongest in the world, while the American forces were undertrained and outnumbered. But they had two advantages: a deep belief in their cause, and strong leadership, especially from General George Washington. Over 8 years of war, there were many key battles, like Saratoga, which convinced France to support the Americans, and Yorktown, where the British finally surrendered in 1781. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed, officially ending the war and recognizing the United States as an independent nation. Building a new nation, 1783–1789. Winning the war was just the beginning. Now the new nation had to figure out how to govern itself. At first, the Articles of Confederation were used, but they made the federal government too weak, So in 1787, delegates met again in Philadelphia to create a stronger system. The result was the U.S. Constitution, a document that laid the foundation for American democracy. It created a government with three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, and included checks and balances to prevent abuse of power. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States. Legacy and impact. The birth of the United States was not just a political event. It was a turning point in world history. For the first time, a group of colonies had successfully broken away from a European empire and formed a republic based on democratic ideals. The American Revolution inspired other movements around the world, from France to Latin America. Of course, the journey was far from perfect. The rights promised in the Declaration didn't apply to everyone, including women, enslaved people, and Native Americans. But the ideas it introduced, liberty, self-government, equality, would continue to grow and evolve over time. From small colonies on the Atlantic coast to a bold new republic, the story of America's birth is one of courage, struggle, and vision. It reminds us that nations aren't just formed by borders and battles. They're reshaped by ideas, people, and the determination to fight for a better future. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories from history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.